Hello and welcome to a new video. Today we are talking about game objects and what they do, what they are, and why do we need them, and all that. So let's first start with what are they. So a game object in Unity is, like the name says, an object in our game, of course. But this is the essential cell, the essential core of the Unity game. It's the game object, because everything in our game will be a game object or need to be represented by one. Even a point in space, it's considered a game object, okay? And this is a particularly important concept that you have to understand, that everything is a game object. So let's start by looking at our sample project here that we created in the previous videos and look at the two game objects. Okay, so these are two game objects in our scene. So let's first start by the camera. The camera is a game object, and this whole thing represents the game object. Okay, so the first here in our inspector, the first lines are the I changed the name. So this is the name of the game object. We can change this however we like, so I can just call it camera, and it changes down here too. So but doesn't change the appearance of our camera or any work that it's doing or it's done or anything. It just changes the name. We have a checkbox right here, and we can see that if we untick this, it stops rendering. So what this means is that our object is active, and now it's not. Now it's active, and now it's not. Okay, so we can turn on and off game objects, and this is particularly useful for, let's say, if we want to hide an object or temporarily destroy it, but then have it come back to life as it were. We can just set it inactive and then set it active, okay? Or enable, disabled, whatever you want to call it. So then we on the left side we have this weird image of a cube with some faces in some colors, and this is actually the icon of our object. We can use any other icon that we want. We have just the points here, or we have these boxes that will contain the name. We can see here that if we change to this green one, we can go here and see that it changed to a green box with the name of our object. So if we change that, camera 1, it will change here. But we can just say none, and the default icon for our camera is this one, and I think it's very much useful. So then we have the static, and what makes an object static or not is just this box right here. But what means static in Unity, it's if an object is not dynamic, or that it will not change position in time or state. It's a little bit complicated because it involves light mapping and other concepts, but for now just look at it as an object that is not dynamic, doesn't move. So our camera obviously is not static, it's a dynamic object. It will move with the player, obviously. So possibly, not obviously. So so let's just let it there. Then we have the tag, and the game object tag. It's well, it's a easier way to categorize an object. So okay, we have a camera 1, let's say we have a camera 2, but we want to put them under the same category, so we can just give both cameras the same tag, and then in our code, in programming, we can just call a function that will look for tags and return a list of objects with the same tag. That's useful for, as you can see, if you click here, we can have tags like respawn, which are predefined in Unity, finish, editor only, main camera, player, and game controller. We can also add other tags such as enemy, which is a tag that represents all enemies. We can also put maybe bullets, who knows, but we will take a look in this later. Layers are useful for a thing called raycasting and other stuff. It's basically like the name says, we can organize objects by layers, and then in code we can actually just focus on a particular layer, okay? But we are not going to use this for now. So this is essential to every game object: its name, its tag, layer, if it's active or not. But then we have another I don't want to spoil it right now, but I need to because it's the name. Another component of a game object. And why did I say I don't want to spoil it? Because game objects in Unity are composed of components. Every game object has at least one component, and I'm going to show you exactly what that component is. But you can see here that everything below this light box here, it's components. So I just collapsed here. It's a component, a transform component, and this is the camera component and the audio listener component. And I can just click here, add component, and I have a list of tons and tons of components that each do its particular job on a game object. Okay, so of course the camera needs a camera component. That's obvious. It's useful for rendering, but if we disable this, you can see that the rendering stops. So we can now actually enable and disable components to do the same as we would disable and enable game objects. Okay, but what I want to show you is the essential component to any game object in Unity. So let's head over to the menu here, game object menu, and we can actually create several game objects from here. We can create an empty child. I'm going to explain what that means in a second. We can create 3D objects, primitives like cubes, spheres, capsules, cylinders, all that, terrains, 3D text. We can create sprites, some effects, some particle systems, some trails, lights. We have direction lights, point lights. I'm going to explain this all, don't worry. Audio, video. We have a lot of game objects. These are all game objects, but I'm going to create an empty one. And you can see that he created a game object called GameObject, okay, and we have something selected here. So you can see here that we have something selected, but we can't actually see what. We have the arrows pointing to our axis, which is the X in red, Z in blue, and Y in green. But we don't see anything there down here. Let's press F. And what F does, it's focus on our object, and we can zoom in real tight, but we can see that we already passed the object. So here we are very close to that object, but we don't see anything because it's an empty game object. Okay, as the name says, create empty. Okay, but let's inspect it. What does this object have in common with the camera and the sun? And you can see that we lost the object. So this is why the hierarchy is very useful, because the object is still in our scene, it just doesn't have any representation or any icon that we can click on it. So we just click here and we select it. And we only have one component. It's a transform component. And that's the base core of any game object in Unity. And that's a concept that it's important to know, because the transform, it's what gives us the position, the rotation, and the scale of our object. Okay, so imagine a 3D space. Imagine our world. Okay, and imagine that I told you that there's a computer somewhere in the world, somewhere. Well, that's not much information for you, because, well, first you need to know its position, right? And in the position in the world, that's useful if you want that computer, okay? But then you can't well, you don't need to know the rotation, but when you see it, you will know exactly what rotation it has. Okay, you may not know the exact degrees that the object is rotated on, but you know it's rotated. You know there's a rotation, and you know that that rotation can change if you rotate the object, if you rotate the computer. And Unity needs this to draw or to place the objects in a coherent way, right? So let's say we have our object in position 0, 1, 0. You can see that it changes down here. But if we change the Y to 2, it immediately goes up, and to 3, and it goes up again. So that's where our sun is. So let's put it on 5, and it's a little above the sun. So this is changing the position. But the rotation, it's a little different, because as we are just moving a point in space, an empty game object is basically a point. A point doesn't have a rotation. We can't exactly see what it is rotating. So let's also we can't scale it, of course, because it's a point. A point doesn't have any scale. So the scale, the default scale is 1, 1, 1. So let's say if we put 2, 2, 2, it means that the object becomes twice as large. Okay, so let's make it to 1. So let's watch this happen if we create a cube. So let's go to GameObject, create 3D object, and cube. And you can see that we created a cube. Very nice. So let's press F to focus. And you can also see that the camera immediately starts rendering the cube. So, and if we do this, we can actually move the cube up and down. So let's just place it here. So this is our cube, and our cube has some components. So we have a transform, of course. We have the mesh filter, which is basically what tells Unity that our cube, how the mesh of our cube is made. And the mesh in 3D is basically the set of triangles that compose the object. So a 3D object is composed by triangles, and you can see here that the cube, the most basic cube, is composed by I don't know, like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 faces. Yes, but in triangles, that's the double, that's twice as many triangles as faces, because a face, each face of the cube, can be composed of at least 2 triangles. So if we separate this, we have a triangle starting here, ending here, and here, and then we have one here, and one here. Or opposite of that, of course, we can just, so we have a vertex here. Let me just use another one, black. So here we have a vertex here, 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 and now we need to define these as triangles, because in 3D everything is defined by triangles. So we can do this, and we have this triangle here and this one here, or we can just define it right here. Also, we can divide this into more triangles, of course, but that's not optimized, because we don't need that much detail in a cube, right? So, and this is what a mesh is the set of all triangles that compose this cube. Then we have the mesh renderer that tells the camera how the cube is supposed to be rendered. So how it will be affected by light. It will have a material, and the material is basically how the color, or the material of the object, because that's a pretty intuitive concept. So we can go with that material, and this is the default material, which is a little white, a little gray, some shadows and all that. So and then we have the box collider component, and the collider component, more specifically the box collider, is what tells our cube that it has bounds and those bounds are supposed to be solid. Okay, so how can you know that an object is solid? Is that if you place your hand on the object, your hand doesn't pass that object, right? So it's solid. So if you knock on your desk, you can't move your hand through the desk, and that's because the desk to Unity has a collider. So if we add a desk in our game, we need to assign a collider to it and define its bounds, so that no hand or no share, no computer, nothing goes through it. Okay, but we'll take a look at that in later videos. So what I want to show you in this video is the basic concept of GameObject and components. And every GameObject will have the transform component. Oh, and since I have a cube here, I can show you. Let's rotate some. We can just press the X here, and we will see that two arrows pop out, and you can just click and drag, and this will move that variable up or down, and you can see that the cube is slowly rotating as you move your cursor. You can just input values as you want: 45 degrees, 180, 90, it's the same of course, 78. You can just put whatever you want. On the y-axis it's like this, and on the z-axis it's like this. So these are the three rotation axes, and the scale we can just do this like this. So we can just put 5 in X scale, Y we want dot 5, so we want a slimmer cube, but we can do it real slim. You can also do negative, which is basically the same, or Z, which is basically we just created a blank. So this is the scale component of the transform, and that's basically it. So that's what I wanted to show you. And this is not a cube anymore, so we need to change the name of course, and we can actually change the tag if we want to. So, but I hope you understood what a GameObject is, what it does, and what it's meant to be used for, and also the components. Don't forget that we are actually going in more depth as we go along, but for now this is the main concepts that you need to be aware of. So thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.